Chapter Questions and Answers, Part 2. Question. Vladimir Nikolaevich, I'm an entrepreneur, and I too know that many wealthy people use the services of rural residents capable of intelligently cultivating and storing agricultural output that truly does surpass that produced on large farms for taste. But with mass production, demand will decline. Then how is the family, which has income only from its own hectare of land, going to exist if it turns out that no one needs the tomatoes and cucumbers they grow?
Answer. Many things besides tomatoes and cucumbers grow on the land. However, if even half of Russian families acquire their own homestead, they will not be able to satisfy the demand for their output for the next 20 or 30 years, because not only Russians but many other countries, especially wealthy foreign ones, will need it. The problem is that the agricultural producers of most countries have been so carried away by hybridizing and chemical treatment of plants that they have simply destroyed their primordial aspect, by which I mean not their outward appearance, but the fullness of their content. If we're talking about cucumbers and tomatoes, then each person can be convinced independently based on this example of the following. Go into an average or even better, good supermarket, which are no rarity now in the big cities. On the shelf you will see very handsome imported tomatoes and cucumbers. The price for them begins at 30 rubles per kilogram. They are identical in size and handsome and sometimes even sold with their green stem, but they have no smell or taste. They are mutants. This is an illusion, a model that outwardly recalls what should be. Most of the world now feeds on mutants like this. This is not my discovery. People in many countries of the West that we consider highly developed are disturbed by this. For example, in Germany, a decision was issued that store labels must indicate that vegetables were produced with the use of specific additives, so that people who are better off will avoid buying them. Food grown in ecologically clean regions with the limited use of chemical fertilizers costs significantly more in the West. However, the farming system that exists in the West does not permit the cultivation of completely organic food. The Western farmer is forced to use the labor of hired workers, all kinds of equipment, chemical fertilizers, and chemical herbicides. He strives to obtain the greatest profit. Suppose a Western farmer decides to grow organic vegetables, and such farmers already exist, according to Anastasia's directions. If you remember, she talked about how all the weeds should not be destroyed because they have their own specific function in producing a harvest. But let's say a farmer still does want to grow this kind of food for his own family and acquaintances. He will face a problem that is difficult to solve. Seeds. Breeding has done its work, and the primordial type no longer exists in the West. Indeed, there is very little of it in Russia, especially since they gave permission for the sale of an imported seed fund. If you use seeds from your own plot, your vegetable crop will gradually aim to restore its primordial properties and take everything man requires from the earth, but complete restoration takes decades. In Russia, perhaps thanks to its poverty and the many small farms, many people use their own seeds, and herein lies their advantage, for soon it will pay off 100-fold on the material level as well. We are talking about seeds, about the need to cultivate agricultural output in ecologically clean zones, and about rejecting chemical fertilizers. All this is correct, and people have been talking about this in various countries of the world, but only talking. There is not enough delicious and healthy agricultural output, especially in highly developed countries. But this is still not all. Processing, preserving. Despite all the efforts of our technocratic world, technically highly equipped combines cannot produce pickled tomatoes, cucumbers, and cabbage that surpass in taste the qualities of those made by many Russian grandmothers. What is their secret? Despite all their wisdom, few know that not more than 15 minutes should pass from the moment a tomato or cucumber is picked from the garden where it is growing to its preservation. The shorter that period, the better. Then the marvelous aroma, ethers, and aura are preserved. The same applies to the flavorings added. Dill, for example. Water has tremendous significance. How can anything we can obtain be good if it uses dead chlorinated water? We boil it and steam the jar. But if people who use spring water add to it, besides everything else, fox berries, want to try it? Take spring water, Add 1/3 foxberries, and you will be drinking this water with pleasure even 6 months later. Preserved vegetables and fruits prepared by hand by many Russians adepts differ markedly for the better. They suppress in taste qualities the output of even the most famous firms in the world, as a taste comparison will convince you. Now let us imagine that a family living on its homestead has rolled out 1,000-liter jars of tomatoes and cucumbers. This is first-class food that surpasses other food on many parameters. Food that has no equal in the world for its taste and ecological purity. Food that many people from different countries of the world, including America's billionaires and tourists vacationing at Cyprus resorts, would like to have for the table. And the jar labels would say, from the Ivanov homestead, from the Petrov homestead, from the Cedars homestead. Of course, entrepreneurs are not interested in selling 1,000-liter jars. But if there are, say, 300 homesteads in a settlement, then they would produce 300,000 jars. And this is now an interesting business even for a large firm. I think that the initial price of a single jar would be the same as it is now in the supermarket, no more than $1. But when people have tried it, the price will rise, maybe even tenfold. I've cited cucumbers and tomatoes merely as an example. There is still much else that can be produced on homestead, for example, wine, fruit liqueurs, berry, currant, raspberry, blackberry, and sweet rowan, liquors, and much else. Each would comprise a bouquet itself, achieving increasing perfection. No super expensive elite wines will compare with them. There is no raw material for wine in the world like what we have in Russia. In addition, wines can be manufactured according to ancient recipes, with the use of herbs, for beneficial vitamin-rich wines. Anastasia says that soon the Russian hand-embroidered side-button shirt will be considered the most fashionable in the world. We can be thinking along these lines as well. Hand-carved wood objects can be produced on the homestead in the winter. In general, folk wisdom says, if you want to be happy, be happy. One might also say, if you want to be rich, be rich. The main thing is not to program yourself for poverty. You should make up your mind to be rich. You must think much more rationally about how to become wealthy and not tell yourself that it is impossible to do so.
Question. Anastasia says that it is much easier for newlyweds to preserve their love in the conditions of the kind of homestead you describe than in an ordinary apartment. Tell me please, have you spoken about this with psychologists and scientists working on the problems of the family, and if so, what do they say on the subject? How can this come about?
Answer. I have not spoken to scientists about this. I'm not very interested in how love is preserved. The main thing is that it is. You may be able to convince yourself that it does by asking, where would you like to see your son or daughter living? In an apartment, like a stone sack, or in a house surrounded by a beautiful garden? Think about it. What would you like to feed your daughter, son, or grandchildren, canned food or fresh organic food? And finally, would you like to see your children healthy or living at the expense of the pharmacy? Ask your young wife this question. Given identical feelings for two men, which would she prefer to marry? One who has arranged his own daily life, his own future family nest in an apartment building, or in a house with a beautiful garden? I think the majority would choose the latter.
Comment. The resurrection of any country can begin only with its spiritual awakening. Members of our government and our president have understood this and begun to speak about spirituality. Anastasia considers the majority of her readers to be highly spiritual individuals living by the laws of God the Creator. She speaks about spiritual values, but you are leading people away into their own private lives and calling on them to engage in business on their own parcel. In this way, you are leading people away from spirituality.
Answer. Ultimately, I believe that no one could ever lead humanity away from true values. It is good that modern rulers are talking about spirituality. Anastasia's statements, which were not always comprehensible to me in the beginning, subsequently have been taking concrete shape anyway. I find what is concrete more understandable than philosophical ruminations, which is why I talk about specific things, considering them the most important on the spiritual level as well. There are probably quite a few concepts of spirituality and God in the world. After my interaction with Anastasia, I too came to make sense of what had happened. For me, God is the individual, a good, intelligent, and life-affirming individual who strives for people's happiness, both for their children and for every person individually. God is the Father who loves and suffers for each person. Having presented each with complete freedom of choice, God is the wisest individual striving each instant to do only good for his children. His sun rises every day and the grass and flowers grow, the trees grow, the clouds float by and the water gurgles, ready at any moment to slake the thirst of any person. I do not believe and would never come to believe that our wise Father could consider constant conversations about spirituality alone, without concrete actions, to be the achievement of spirituality. Ever since the so-called Iron Curtain vanished, a horde of various spiritual prophets from all over has flooded our country. Quite a few homegrown ones have appeared as well. They all try to tell us what God the Father wants from us. Some say you have to eat a certain way. Others teach which words are best addressed to God. Still others, such as Krishnaites, say that we should hop around and chant mantras from morning until night. But for me, this is simply nonsense. I am convinced that no greater pain could be conceived for God than this kind of grimacing, hopping, and howling. Any loving parent tries to make sure his son or daughter continues the family business and takes part in joint creation with him. God's direct creations are around us. What could be a higher manifestation of the love for God than a protective attitude toward these creations? Then arranging one's children's and one's own life with the help of these divine creations. Neither the country as a whole nor any individual has become happier from all this grimacing and meditating. We have not become happier because it is they who are leading us away from the truth, from God. They are leading us away forcibly, relentlessly, suggesting more and more new versions of grimacing as the truth. Teachings come and go. Some of them exist for centuries and then only make us laugh. Others appear for a few years and vanish without a trace, like a flare. After them, we only have their trash, filth, and broken human destinies to look at. To the question of why we are forced to listen constantly to different words about God from the mouths of these prophets and why God does not speak words to us directly, Anastasia replied.
Words? There are so many words with different meanings among various peoples, so many dissimilar languages and dialects. But there is one language of divine appeals. It is woven from the rustling of leaves, the singing of birds, and the waves. God's language has smells and color. God gives a prayerful answer in this language to each request and prayer.
God speaks with us every moment, but it is out of our spiritual laziness that we do not want to hear him. Here I will sing a mantra, hop and sprinkle manna from heaven, and God will make me happy and make me chosen above all others, once and for all. But we must spend years setting up our own paradise, waiting for fruit-yielding trees to grow and flowers to blossom. But by not doing this, we do not simply reject God, we offend him. We demean him with our endless talk and grimaces. You do not have to listen to Anastasia, let alone me. But ultimately, you will walk into a springtime forest or garden, and falling silent, listen closely to your heart. The hearts of many will certainly hear the voice of the Father, who, according to Anastasia, when asked what God can do when the energy of destruction dominates everyone on earth, when by invoking his name for their own benefit, some people think they can suddenly subordinate others, replied.
With the coming day I will rise as the dawn. The sun's ray caressing all creations on earth without exception will help my daughters and sons understand that each can speak with me, soul to soul.
He has always believed in us, saying,
There is one main obstacle to the diversity of reasons leading to an impasse, to nowhere. It will be a bar to everything that bears a lie. My sons and daughters aspire to understanding the truth. A lie always has bounds, but the truth is boundless. It is one, and understanding will always be found in the soul of my daughters and sons.
Let each person make haste to find in his soul the consciousness of a son of God, not a slave or half-witted bio-robot hopping around to bells. But how much can one ask for oneself from God? Please, lift me up, free me. Isn't it time for us to do something nice for our Father? And what might be nice and bring joy to him? Responding to a similar question, Anastasia spoke about a simple test that will help you verify many spiritual concepts and trends.
When your soul is stirred by an assertion coming from someone's lips supposedly in the name of God, pay attention to how the prophet himself lives, And then imagine what would happen to the world if everyone started living like that.
The simple tests can help clarify a great deal. I tried to imagine what would happen to humanity if each and every person on earth might begin chanting mantras from morning until night, as the Krishnaites do, and I immediately got the end of the world. Now imagine that each person on earth cultivated his own garden. Then, of course, the entire earth would be transformed into a flowering, heavenly garden. I am an entrepreneur, or used to be, but nonetheless, the entrepreneur is certainly a specificity that is close to me. And perhaps for this reason, I believe that a person can be considered spiritual if he is capable of undertaking actions beneficial to the earth, his family, and his parents, that is, to God. If someone who calls himself spiritual cannot make himself, the woman he loves, his family, and his children happy, then that is pseudo-spirituality.
Question. Anastasia spoke about a qualitatively new way to raise children, about a new school. Is it possible only in the conditions of the settlement she has outlined, or is it in large modern cities too? What does Szczecinin say about this? Back in the first book, Anastasia was quoted as saying that she believes the raising of children to be the most important thing, and she has always tried to talk about education. But you constantly skirt this issue and barely any light is shed on it in your books. Why?
Mikhail Petrovich Szczecinin organized his boarding school in the forest. As soon as the first settlement consisting of individual homesteads is begun to be laid out, we must ask Mikhail Petrovich to develop a special program for the future school. I will ask him, if he himself cannot teach in it, then to send us his best students and select appropriate teachers from among those working there now. I do not believe it is possible to organize a school like this in today's cities. Let us recall, without Anastasia, our own school years. In school, people say one thing, in public another, and in the family something else. By the time you understand where the truth lies, by the time you try to obtain an integral perception of the world, you look and half your life has passed. I think we ourselves need to learn to live decently before we can try to educate our own children. Once we have arranged a worthy human existence, we can worry about our children and schools acting in unison, complementing one another. Anastasia does indeed often speak about rearing the child, but what she says does not resemble any system scheduled by the day, hour, and minute. Frequently, her statements are not all that understandable in general. For example, she says that parents must begin raising their children by raising themselves, by arranging their own happy existence, with their own attempts to touch the thoughts of God. One of the main elements of an education is, in fact, a beautiful homestead.
End of chapter. Join us for the next segment of Who Are We? Book 5 of the Ringing Cedars series, Philosophy of Life, Part 1.